And this is why on verse 13, if you have a Bible, he comes into this kind of a closing of this section by saying, who is going to harm you? In other words, he's not speaking that the harm or the suffering is going to be removed or go away. But even if it is present, or as it continues to be present, you will not be hurt. You will not be harmed. And this is why. Because even if you do this, you go face the reality through the eagerness of doing good. So the admonition that we see Peter bringing to the church through this new reality of the two eras, Jesus has already come. Many of the audience, many of the people who received this message, Peter himself, they were eyewitnesses of the first coming of Jesus, and they were hoping, they were praying, they have this desire because of the threat of being harmed and the reality of trying to do good in the context of evil, in the context of suffering. Peter reminds the church 2,000 years ago that the wind of living life in the tension of the two eras of the kingdom of God being present but yet not being consummated, of the reality that Maria and I have a conversation over the phone as she goes into surgery and she's praying and we're praying for healing power. The reality is that God healed her. But the healing that she experienced is a healing that comes after the spirit is detached from the body. Now, here's the beauty of the conversation, that although her body now is going to the ground and the burial takes place, and again, there's that detachment of the body, we believe based on the second, and this is why the admonition, the command, the instruction is stop fearing, because no one can harm you. That's what he's talking about. Now, within that hurting or harm is speaking also from the reality that, again, although Maria and all of us will experience, Peter experienced physical death, we will not know the second or the spiritual death. We will never know what is to be detached from the presence of God, because absent from the body, present with the Lord. See, this is why the antidote, or how you deal with fear in the context of suffering, is understanding that you are able to do good. That's the blessing. So in my mind, I'm drawn into the conversation of another apostle that is in prison, is incarcerated, and he's speaking to churches in the province of Philippi. This is the church of the Philippians, and speaking to them, Paul reminds them in chapter 4, verse 13, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. The blessing is not that we can do all things. The blessing, and Peter reminded them, the blessing is that we can receive the strength of God, of Jesus, when we cannot do everything. The blessing is not simply that he is my shepherd, but although I may go through the valley of the shadow and death, sometimes it is the same shepherd that takes me through that route. But yet, he will comfort me. He will be my shepherd. See, the blessing is not that Maria avoided hell and it's in heaven. Those things are included. That's not the blessing. The blessing is that Maria, what she got at the end of the endurance and the perseverance and the celebration, and as we go through life, and you and I eventually will get to the same place, the blessing, I'm going to say that again, is that at the end, our inheritance is a person. And it's God himself. In that context is that Peter reminds them and tells them that although you may be in a situation where even if you should suffer, even, again, because the blessing does not imply, if God is the object of your life, does not imply that you are immune. That does not guarantee that you have become exempt from suffering. But although if you were to suffer, because we are in a Genesis 3 world, because the eras, the situations are in a place where there overlap, and the prince of the air is real, and sin is real, the pandemic is real, death is real. If or when you go through the valley of the shadow and death, I want you to do it because of righteousness, because of doing good, because God is the object of everything that you do and everything that you experience. The opposite of this is the suffering that does not honor God. The opposite of this is the suffering that is what we call self-inflicted suffering. So in this case, he says, I want to make sure that what happens to you, and if you were to suffer, is for what is right, and then watch this, you are blessed. So in this case, what I want to remind you, because again, I'm going to say this again. This is real. The suffering is real. The tragedies are real. The challenges are real. The uncertainty is real. I want to remind you that in Peter's agenda, the antidote of suffering, how you navigate and how you counter, experience the suffering, is through a forensic righteousness. And this righteousness is what allows you to do right in the context of injustice, in the context of unrighteousness, in the context of brokenness. So for us, when Peter says, I want you, if you were to suffer, it's because you are doing right. Unfortunately, many Christians in this time in history were suffering because of self-inflicted, because they were a part of a broken system that instead of focusing on the object of life, which is God, they were focusing on self-indulgence and self-gratification. This is why what you see at the bottom is when the driving force is not the transformation of circumstances, but the righteousness of Jesus that has been given to us. When that is the focus, we are able to confront, to see the reality of suffering or pain, or in this case, even death, through the concept of fearlessness. That we are able to literally see the stage and the scenario of these calamities as the perfect place for us to remind ourselves that what was promised is that He was going to be our shepherd in spite of the circumstances.